go. Thank you. Right. Well, while Von's faffing around with his technicals, I'll welcome everybody. Thanks for sticking with us, folks. Been a really interesting day so far. And it's about to get a lot more interesting, I think, because this is a topic that has been kind of just propelled onto the scene this year, certainly, and is a real question on a lot of people's lips. So our topic today is, for this session, is virtual a reality? And we've got 45 minutes, slightly under now, to decide whether it is or not. So, I mean, as you know, our industry and in fact, our whole way of life has been brought to its knees. And some operators have been incredibly quick to switch their experiences to online. Certainly larger operators whose bread and butter was city-based walking tours and experiential activities moved quite quickly to establish an online product range. And I'm sure you all know some of your colleagues in the industry who've started delivering virtual tours or virtual experiences. Now, the opinion of virtual tours from several different industry commentators has really blown hot and cold since the start of the pandemic. People saying it's a non-starter, people saying it's the next big thing. We've had kind of every range of opinion, and you know what opinions are like, everybody's got one. But the fact is that they're still on sale, they're still proving popular, and they're providing, for some people, a much needed source of income from for a lot of people. So the question today is really, are they continuing to provide that source of income, or are they barely worth the effort? So to help us explore that question and to delve a bit deeper into the world of online virtual experiences, I'm delighted to have another superb panel of industry heavyweights with us today. Firstly, I'll introduce him first because he's from my home country. We've got Pepe Martinez. Pepe worked in theatre as a stage manager before nearly 20 years in the travel industry as a tour manager, before qualifying as a London Blue Badge guide about 10 years ago. More recently, because of the pandemic, he has been presenting online virtual tours with pretty good success, and he's just launched a subscription service for virtual tours, and I'll let him tell you about that in a few moments. Secondly, we have Brandon Shaw, who is a co-founder and chief operating officer at The Tour Guy, who operate all their own tours all over Europe and offer a wide selection of virtual experiences. Next, we have Kelsey Toner, founder of the Beer Better Guide project and the Online Tourism Academy. The Online Tourism Academy offers online training solutions for tour guides and tour companies in the form of video-based online courses and custom-built training portals. So whilst a lot of people have pivoted to delivering virtual tours, Kelsey and his team is pivoting to deliver training for them. And lastly, but by absolutely no means least, we welcome Stephen Oddo, founder and CEO of Take Walks. So Stephen co-founded Walks of Italy, an online travel company for visitors to Italy, offering sightseeing and VIP tours in 2009. And Walks has since launched tours in New York, Istanbul, Paris, everywhere in the world pretty much that is important to tourists. And they rebranded as takewalks.com in 2018. Walks is now one of the largest wholly owned operators of sightseeing tours in the world. So thank you very much for joining us, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Let me just kick off with a very, very basic question to start with. And the questions might be quite ignorant questions, if you'll excuse that, and luckily they come naturally to me. So please excuse the kind of basic questions. But if you could just kick us off by briefly explaining what virtual products are you actually offering to customers at the moment? And Brandon, we'll start with you.
Okay, so we started off with the basics, so kind of mimicking regular tours that we offer, going from the Colosseum, the Vatican, the Louvre, the Eiffel Tower, kind of the core products. And we got a lot of success from those in the beginning, and so we decided to continue that, offering different tours of focusing a lot on artists themselves, you know, so like a Da Vinci special or a Michelangelo, and just kind of following the trend that people wanted. It's kind of a hit and miss because we're not really sure, since it's kind of new for all of us, we're not really sure what people want. So besides doing our regular bread and butter, which would be actual tours, just with the tour guide, we're also doing cooking classes, which became very popular. And the ease of doing that, obviously being online, is that you can contact people from all over the world, be it Japan or India, and they can do a tour for you, you know, as long as the time's set up correctly. So it's been really interesting. I guess to better answer the question, it's just our core sites that people go and visit, and then afterwards, we even did something last week with South American fruit, just to see if it would sell, and people are interested in it. So it's hard to nail down what exactly really works, because it's, if you're not physically present, you can kind of do whatever you want. But I would say that the core is just the regular museums that people would visit.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Stephen, we'll fling over to you if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah, we had a kind of a similar path as Brandon. We kind of digitized and did multimedia presentations of our core product line. Obviously, very similarly, attraction heavy museums and so forth. So archaeological sites. So doing, being that we couldn't access those in person, the virtual made a lot of sense. So that was an easy pivot. I think the big challenge there was finding the guides who had the technical capabilities, and hosting a virtual experience is very different from a guided experience, and you'd find that a good portion of guides didn't even like the experience. So for those who have been a little more skeptical, it might be that they're just not for you. Tour guides and virtual experience hosts don't necessarily overlap perfectly. Then, outside of our core product, we launched a series called the Spotlight series, where we were doing similar things, kind of calling out different categories, topical things that were going on in the world. We even did a virtual tour of Wuhan, China. So we really kind of went outside the box of what you could do virtual tours of. And during the pandemic, obviously, there was a lot of interest in what was going on in different parts of the world. So we didn't just do tours of places that we already were touring, but also of other types of tours and food tours, cooking classes like what Brandon talked about, wine experiences. We've done a lot of that as well. I think we've launched over 50 products at this point.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I imagine a virtual tour of Wuhan is slightly more popular than a physical tour of Wuhan earlier this year.
The timing was kind of coordinated with when the city reopened, and to talk about, really the focus there was to talk about something different than the pandemic. Obviously, a major city in China had a lot more about it than just the pandemic and the things that people were reading in the news. So we're trying to shine a different light on it, and we had hundreds of people join that from all over the world. And I think that is the kind of thing we really like to do, is think outside the box on product.
Brilliant. Thank you for the insight there. Pepe.
Hi, Adam. Well, my virtual road started back in late April. I was approached by Guide London and asked to put together a small training program to try to give some of the Guide London members some skills to allow them to do virtual tours. So we put together a short training. We ended up training nearly 400 guides around the country. And so I started putting together my own product as well. I did a tour, a walking tour that I thought was a bit of a gap in my knowledge. And I was always thinking ahead that perhaps I could do it as a physical tour one day. I then did that for a training program. I screen recorded 10 minutes of it and then sent the video out to some groups that I'd guided before in the real world. One group picked up the idea, and so I did a virtual tour for them. They invited some members of other groups, and then it just began snowballing. And so I slowly built up a group of art societies and pensioners or seniors groups in the UK. And that's when I got onto this idea that perhaps, as during restrictions and lockdown, these people who normally pay membership fees and are normally doing visits and visiting museums and having lectures, they're going to be looking for content for their membership fees. And so that got me onto the idea of perhaps offering them a whole season of tours, which is what I've just kind of been building up to and launched last week.
Okay, brilliant. So just the launch, how you've been successful?
Well, I'm not particularly good with anything like MailChimp. I mean, I had to teach myself how to use MailChimp to create databases, to create newsletters. And I went very quickly from having about 50 contacts to about 450 contacts over the course of about 5 weeks, just slowly building up the momentum. We offered 2 free showcases. So I kind of handpicked some of the best guides that I thought were really good at virtual tours from the training program, and suggested that we all do 5 or 6 minutes each as a free online showcase just to whet people's appetite. And then we launched last Friday after the second showcase, and we've sold 100 packages in the first week, and we're still 7 weeks from actually the package beginning at the beginning of January. So we're all very happy, and I think we're definitely seeing that people are thirsty for a whole raft of content whilst restrictions don't allow them to do regular visits.
Okay, brilliant. Well, congratulations for launching that. Kelsey, so you've got a online tour training content now. Has that always been in your repertoire, or is that something that you've kind of moved into pretty quickly at the start of this year?
Yeah, we hadn't had this program prior to the pandemic. Essentially, we have a community now of almost 30,000 tour and activity business owners and freelance guides, tour directors around the world. And so we were surveying them and asking, hey, what would you like help with? How can we help as the pandemic was unfolding? And so we hosted one of the first virtual conferences, and then we quickly saw lots of people asking questions and honestly asking us, because we are a training company that does everything remotely and online. So we were very familiar with the camera, the technology, how to come across well on screen. So we quickly put together the virtual tour business program. And today we have about 275 tour and activity business owners and a large number of tour directors, freelance guides as well. And so how I might answer that question is, because we've been able to work so closely with these folks since about April, some of the, let's say, products that have done well, when we, this is great. Like, we're seeing this as a little petri dish where people are putting things out, they're testing them out. Here's 3 of the products that we're seeing getting most traction. And the first and foremost is highlighting kind of what Stephen and Brandon highlighted, which is something that has an educational experience to it. Where we're seeing people fail is trying to bring an in-person tour directly online and say, hey, this is for people who love London, or this is for people who love Rome. And the issue there is it's far, far, far too broad. And we can get into this later, but the key is to really, really niche down and find out specifically who this particular tour product or online experience is for. So again, anything that can have an educational experience. We've seen Airbnb online experiences doing this live. That's where we're seeing most traction. Again, Stephen, Brandon, you guys probably saw that same traction, the live event, the ability to have that interactivity, to do something together. The more hands-on, the better. That's the first. The second is an at-home delivery component. So food and beverage are doing really well in terms of coming up with creative packages that you can send to people's home. You get a nicer markup. You add all kinds of complication because now you're getting into sourcing and delivering things. However, that can pay dividends. And we're seeing lots of people, whether it's wineries, breweries, food tour companies, creating at-home delivery products. And again, I think part of the secret sauce there is people love getting things in the mail. You have that extra convenience of, if I can't go out, I can get new experiences delivered right at home. And the third is definitely in the corporate and team building sector, where we're seeing all kinds of companies essentially moving to remote work. And now they're struggling to, how do we keep our team motivated? How can we have some fun together? What are we going to do for our holiday parties? And so we're seeing a lot of interest, frankly, crazy demand, especially now as we're getting into second lockdowns and holidays coming up. Those are just, we'll say, 3 that we're seeing people have lots of success with.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, gents. So for those of us who have, or not me, but for people who've never taken a virtual tour, actually, before we ask that question, those of you listening, if you just pop a 1 in the chat if you've not taken any kind of online or virtual tour, whatever, really, that would just be quite interesting to gauge. So far, everyone has taken one. Oh, there we go. Brendan's not taken one. So just an interesting question. So from a starting point, how are most of the tours hosted? Are they presentation formats, so they're not live, somebody walking around the streets or at the venue? Or are they pre-prepared video, like a hybrid of pre-prepared video presentation and somebody on a live video call? Or is it all kind of pre-recorded? What's the format that you're getting success with, Stephen? If we could go to you, please.
Yeah, so I actually really liked a lot of Kelsey's comments there. I mean, we've seen exactly those same trends in terms of product. For us, we've done all paid tours, and with that, we've delivered live tours and only live tours. So while we have done a couple of private pre-recorded things, in general, it's all been live. I think the idea of being live with a tour guide or a person or a host or whatever they are in that destination is part of the demand, it's part of the interest. I think, if you were just trying to talk to or watching a video, you could do that already. That need is pretty much served on YouTube or social media, right? That's all for the most part pre-recorded. So, I think that's how we've looked at it, is going fully live. And then in terms of presentation, as I mentioned, we started out almost exclusively or really exclusively with multimedia other than the food tours, meaning slideshows, videos. So in that case, I'm pre-recorded. And then we started to, as things reopened, we started to do things out in the field. So we've done a number of products that way. But we find that, people really enjoy both. They're just, they fit different needs, but both can work really well. I've seen a lot of companies do pre-recorded really well too.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And Brandon, what about yourself?
Yeah, same thing. I agree with Steve completely. Again, it's very, very similar. I think one of the main advantages of having it live is that you can literally go and either chat or speak directly with the tour guide, which is super important. If you're doing a cooking class and you're sitting there and you're getting a little bit lost at what you're doing, oh, what do you have to do? And then you can kind of show your dish. Hey, am I doing this right? And the cook is like, no, add this, add that. And so I think that's because people can't see each other live. This is something, the next best thing I think that people can do. So, as far as the model goes, we do the same thing as Steve mentioned. And nothing pre-recorded yet, but pretty much everything live, and people, yeah, very positive remarks and feedback from it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Pepe, from your point of view, as a tour guide and somebody who's just done that face-to-face experience, ever since you started your career, what have been your big challenges in transitioning to this virtual world? Have you had to teach yourself, apart from the technical stuff, which I know you've spoken about, what have you had to teach yourself, or what have you had to do differently?
Well, I definitely had a rudimentary knowledge of PowerPoint. I certainly had to get those skills up, and I had pretty basic computer skills 8 months ago. I thought Zoom was a 1980s pop record. I had no idea about all of this technology, but like most people, I've adapted really quickly. I've really embraced it because I've seen the effect that it has on people. The kind of people that I'm guiding might not see anybody for the entire day except for the people on the screen on a live Zoom, a virtual tour. For me, a big component of it is not just the content, it's the interactivity, and it's seeing I always encourage the group to turn all their cameras on at the end, and we have a question and answer session. Listen, it's never going to replace the real thing, and we don't ever expect it to, but we expect to hopefully whet their appetites. And the idea is that when lockdown restrictions end, we'll go and show them the real thing. And if I may, just to answer a question that people have been typing in chat, in London and in Britain, we have suggested that the guides do not do any museums. Firstly, the museums are really struggling, so they can generate income by doing their own virtual tours. Secondly, there's the issue of copyright. And so we've suggested all of those iconic sites you can do when you come over. We're going to do, as people have suggested, themed tours, maybe a different angle on London. Somebody's even done a virus tour, so all the famous viruses that have affected or afflicted London through the millennia. So we're just doing enough to keep them interested, and hopefully the iconic stuff they can do when they come over physically.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And just to quickly clarify a question from the chat from John. In this context, we're talking about chargeable tours, so not kind of free, content that you can put on YouTube and stuff. So this is, very much, commercially driven. Kelsey, what has been the biggest challenge you've had in training the guides? Because Stephen mentioned earlier that one of the challenges was the guides and either their technical ability or just them buying into the whole concept. What's been your experience in terms of the biggest area that people have needed to kind of get, the biggest barrier that people have faced?
Yeah, I think some of the questions that we're seeing in the chat are the exact same things that people are asking when they enter the program, or I think when they're even thinking about virtual tours, like, well, what is this? What do I need to do it? And all these questions, like, is it live? Is it pre-recorded? We're really entering the wild, wild west, if you will. And our approach was very much that once you figure out who you are serving, that's going to help you dictate the type of online experience. And that's a very, very wide bucket in our view that might serve them best. And so I think a lot of people struggle with well, I have to start almost further down the chain. I have to come up with a product idea and then work backwards to find out who it's for. And so we're very much about going back to the beginning and focusing on the who. So a great example, we're doing some coaching with a company down in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And she said, well, I do city tours and some cooking experiences here in Buenos Aires and tango experiences. So we were thinking of, again, a more generic product that's trying to replace their tours. And we said, well, let's try and niche that down. It sounds like a great product that you could explore is tango enthusiasts. Let's just really niche in on tango. And now let's take it a step further. Okay, if this online experience is for tango enthusiasts, what part of the world? Is this for Argentinians? Is this for Americans? Is this for Europeans? Is it for young people and families? Is it for beginners, people who are new to tango? Is it for people who are very passionate about it? Is the best format going to be a one-off online experience? Or in that case, we talked about why not create some sort of virtual club where, again, you're shifting to more of a monthly reoccurring revenue format where you have a low monthly fee, maybe 15, 20, 25 euros a month. And then you can provide experiences for the people, these tango enthusiasts around the world. So we talked about a lot of these incredible, let's say, tango performers and competitors. They're probably not flying around the world and participating. Could you have them come and have this incredible access to a tango person? Can you give obviously recorded lessons? Hey, here's a move to practice. Hey, here's our favorite music or playlist. Okay, we're going to do a breakdown of this competition together. And what you've done here is you're now allowing who you're serving to help dictate the form of the product itself. And it also solves, which is coming back to your question, Adam, and we want to be very realistic about, is the marketing and distribution. That's where even if people kind of get through, they get the idea, they start getting some early traction, how are we actually going to market and position this? And that's where getting really niche to someone like tango enthusiasts is fantastic, because now we can do some guerrilla marketing, right? Guess where those tango enthusiasts are hanging out? In Facebook groups, in Reddit communities. There's bloggers and influencers that you can tap into and maybe do revenue share, so that a blogger or, again, a YouTube personality might be willing to share your online experience. So we'll leave it there. But Adam, those are a couple of challenges. One, just wrapping your head around what even can I create? And secondly, then the marketing side of it, because you're very much on your own in terms of marketing and distributing these online experiences.
Cool, thank you. So Brandon and Stephen, how much training did you actually put your guide through to kind of convert to this process? I don't mind who wants to go first.
Sure, I'll go.
Go ahead,
so
Steve.
yeah, we put together kind of a fairly quick training program. So let's say, for the guides that we had that were interested when we first launched, we did a series of trainings, feedbacks back and forth. I'd say the whole process probably took, a few hours per guide. And when we initially launched, we launched with like 15 products. So it was a good amount of work in advance. And now, I think we can now easily have people audit the current product and kind of understand what we're doing. And so we don't need as much of the hand holding. And now there's enough of this out there that I think the main hurdle is to get people to figure out time zones, Zoom, because Zoom can be a real pain. And, I don't know if everybody's using Zoom, but, so those are the bigger challenges. And if you're doing out in the field tours, that can be another complication, is the coordination between, having the right lighting, having the right data connection. All of those need to be part of the process as well. And best intentions, if you think the data is going to be great, and then you go out to the site and it turns out you don't get it, then that's a major challenge that you have to try to figure out. So, it's more than just the content side of the training. It's also the logistics and time zones. I mean, there's a lot of tours, for example, that had to change their departure times because of the sunlight, right? Like, you wouldn't think about that when you're developing the tours in April, but then all of a sudden it's dark outside at 4 o'clock. You're like, wait a minute, I can't do an outside tour at 4 o'clock. So, gives you some limitations there. You got to think through.
Okay, cool. And Brandon, anything to add in terms of the tour guide training process?
Yeah, I think so. We use Big Marker, which is a little bit different than Zoom, and it fairly complicated in the beginning. It gave us a few extra benefits we could do, but polls and stuff like that. But a lot of the tour guides, I think Steve can attest this as well. As far as technology goes, they weren't always the top. They they didn't know a lot about technology, you know, and I know Pepe, you actually said about that as well. So, you know, obviously you're a tour guide, you're going on the city, and we had to kind of give them some really interesting things technology-wise. They had to put together presentations, and that was a little bit, not painful, but it took a little bit, and to find specific guides who could actually do that. And then once we got going, then it got easier, of course, over time. But in the beginning, we dedicated quite a bit of time to getting them familiar to the platform, how to actually speak, working the microphone, working the video. You know, if something happens, if it just freezes, what do you do? Don't panic, and just kind of, it's a little bit of a learning curve, but in the end, they got through it, and it's been fine ever since.
Cool, thank you. So you mentioned there about you talked to the guys about how to talk, which is really interesting, because presenting on Zoom or on any online platform is completely different to kind of engaging a live group of people that are stood in front of you or sat in front of you, whatever scenario it may be. Pepe, did you go anywhere to try and kind of pick up skills to do that differently, or did you just kind of trust that your own natural communication style would come through the camera as it would in person?
I mean, I think I went on instinct personally. I mean, because we are talking about three very different skills. Talking to camera, for one, knowing where that little dot is and funneling everything through. Guiding is a separate skill in itself, and computer skills, PowerPoint skills. These are three skills that normally you don't need together. So it just takes practice. So when we created our training, we did it over a whole day, but we gave people a week to put together a little video project, 5 minutes virtual tour, utilizing all of the skills that we showed them, and then we essentially critiqued them. But I remember my first few, you know, it was absolutely terrifying, just like it was in my first few days as a guide. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Now it's the most natural thing in the world. It's like patting your stomach or rubbing your stomach and patting your head. Eventually, it just becomes natural the more you feel comfortable with the technology. And you know what? Things do go wrong. The tech does go down, but you set the expectation with the audience, and they like that. It's human. It makes it, you know, they're not looking for Spielbergian quality films here. They can log on to the BBC. They like the liveness of it. And if things do go wrong, I think they find it just makes you more human. So that's what we tell our guides anyway, when they first set out. Don't panic if anything goes wrong.
Cool. And Kelsey, what kind of great tips and tricks are you delivering to your students or your classes?
Yeah, you betcha. That's a huge part of our program. I think you can do a lot with pre-recorded to have, if you shift your mindset to thinking about facilitating an experience. If you think about how can I get people moving, even if they're sitting passively behind a computer, what can I have them do? What can they assemble with their hands? What can they smell? What can they taste? Even if you're not delivering something, we know some people are doing coffee sort of experiences, and they just say, hey, here's what you need. Get some instant coffee, get some fresh beans from a local roaster, and then get some, I don't know, General Folgers beans or something like that. And they're going to walk you through doing something. So there, you're not even getting into the delivery component, but you still have this focus on facilitating an experience. And you can do that with pre-recorded, but again, in the live settings, there's all kinds of best practices. As a hint, what we're seeing for those that want a really smooth guest experience is we actually have two people facilitate the experience. One, as we were exploring here, who is essentially customer support and doing the back-end stuff. So if you are using a product like Zoom, there's some really powerful tools for just 15 or 20 bucks a month that unlocks that 40-minute time limit. You can use things like breakout rooms. So if you've got a bunch of people arriving, we say a great thing to do, instead of a whole bunch of intros that can take up a lot of time, send people out to breakout rooms. And now they're in a more intimate 3 to 4 person group, 4 to 5 people, they say a quick hello, we bring them back. You can have somebody who's managing that kind of tech, and then the other person, the host, is focusing on the guest experience, on answering questions. So that's one little tip. But interactivity is so key. And we say in the program, you know, whatever the saying is, the camera adds 15 pounds or something like that. All of you watching can be the judge. 20 pounds? Okay, you can be the judge of what you're seeing on screen here. But just know that it also saps 20% of your energy. We've been on those calls, especially if you're doing it for business, like, whoa, the energy just comes down, down, down. And this is something that we're familiar with, right? When you get in front of a group, you got to bring your energy up. It's a lot harder to do when you're sitting in your own room, potentially in a basement somewhere, but you really, really need to focus on bringing that energy up. So those are 3 big things. Focus on the facilitation of the experience, use all those senses, and focus on bringing your energy up and interactivity.
Okay, great. So we've had some questions in the chat. We've got about kind of 10, 15 minutes left. So if we could put a few more questions, if you want any more questions asked, please put them in the chat and we'll come to them in a second. In terms of Brandon and Stephen, question for you really is, as you're the guys operating this at scale, where are you seeing the most popularity in terms of destinations and types of experiences? I guess there's two different categories. Brandon, what about you? What's your most popular tours at the moment online?
The classic ones. So the Louvre is one of the top sellers. The Vatican is a top seller, I think. Also, the Colosseum. So again, it kind of mimics a lot of what we do in real life, I guess you call it. So in real life tours, it mimics very much the same. We've experimented with a lot of different other destinations, but as far as like on a week by week basis, our core products are the ones that sell the best.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And Stephen, what about you? What about for walks?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. I think, look, if you're looking to get into this business, no matter where you are, there can be demand either if you generate it through free tours at first, or develop sort of your list or audience. It's going to be very hard to break into this virtual space without any any demand to yield. So you need to be using something and leveraging some audience. So with that in mind, of course, Brandon or I would have. Our core products are the ones that we're already reaching customers at, that we have email lists to reach out to, that we have social media engaged to reach those people. Otherwise, it's not going to be likely that we're going to sell lots of different destinations on a continuous basis. So what I mean by that is, having customers frequently book, versus running a special kind of one-off or a series that's a limited time only, like what I was describing with our product line earlier, where we actually have our highest levels of attendance, but it's not something that could sustain for 52 weeks a year. It's something that we could run 3 or 4 times. So that's the big thing to think about there in terms of product is who are you going to reach on a consistent basis versus what can you do as a big splash, as a one-off, or a series that will kind of shift focus or extend the audience a bit. But for us, I think it's more about the core product line. Pompeii has been really popular for us. Pepe, you mentioned viruses. We actually have a plague tour that's been consistent, done very well. Otherwise, the other products of the Vatican, the major museums have been successful. But again, that's because that's who we've reached. It's who historically took those tours with us. So they're jumping back on. And then I'll also say the food tours have been very successful. Food and wine's always great because it's more interactive. And we've actually had customers take some of the food experiences over 10 times. So, you can continually, if you're changing your recipes or changing what you're sending or changing, the whatever you're presenting, then you can see people have a lot of repeat business there.
I think that's a great nugget actually about having that repeat business in terms of having an interchangeable kind of product that you can just change up and create that constant demand. Question from somebody earlier in the chat about just creating these experiences and stuff in the first place. So somebody's based, let's say they're based in the US and they always deliver tours in Italy. They're not doing that anymore. How do they start off thinking about how they can create a virtual experience in their own area? What do they even start to think about first? Kelsey, maybe you want to take this one.
I got to continue to emphasize, start around the who. You've got to figure out who you're serving. And too often, this is where people are tripping up and failing, is this process of, I'm going to make something and then go out into the world and try and find people to buy it. And I strongly encourage you to flip that around on its head. Because if you're going to create an online experience for retired couples who live in Florida in their 60s, that should look a hell of a lot different than an experience for young parents who've got small kids at home and want to help on the homeschool angle. So that's going to give you a lot of guidance. One last thing, echoing what Stephen said, 100%, we're seeing repeat business. Once you get fans, once you give them that great experience, keep this in mind as not just what's the experience I can create, but what are the experiences that I can create? Because these are the people that you can leverage. Basically, you're increasing your lifetime customer value. They come, Stephen's right. Like they're coming back to people in our program and they're saying, hey, what can we do a couple of weeks from now? Or, oh my gosh, my kids love that. Or, hey, I work for a company. We're seeing this all the time, that just natural organic leads. So at Chateau Philly in France, they're in a program. They created an online experience that was sort of an educational wine tasting experience that didn't involve a delivery component. And then somebody came along and asked, hey, can you do this for 50 people for our company? And so the answer for her was, well, no, we've never done that. But what she said was, yeah, damn straight we can do that. Let's figure it out, right? So the opportunities are going to present themselves. So don't get too much in a rut of, I'm going to create one thing and then I'm going to sell that thing. You're going to create one thing and you're going to tweak it, or it may be broken, it may not sell, it might actually work better for someone else. And then you're going to create more things. So I think that's a healthier way to think about it. Last thing I just want to plug in there, don't also think of live or pre-recorded. You can blend those really seamlessly and do it very effectively. One of the best-selling Airbnb online experiences was a plague tour in Prague, and he very effectively combines pre-recorded footage of him walking around with like a crazy old school plague mask in the city while he's there live as well. We just gave some advice to someone who's creating a chocolate experience in New York. And I said, well, yeah, you could partner with like a world famous chocolatier who lives in New York, but that's going to be difficult, right? Because you can only sell tours if that person is there. Why not pre-record that? Go in, get a tour of their facility, get some nice tight clips, get them to tell a great story about how to tell great chocolate from crap chocolate, and then tighten that up. And now I've got 4 minutes, 5 minutes of pre-recorded content that I can easily layer into a great interactive chocolate experience.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So a few questions in the chat, and these are really interesting actually for me on a personal level, because a week tomorrow I'm delivering my first virtual experience with my wife and kids, delivering a cookie making class just for charity to kind of mainly friends and family. But anyway, so I'm kind of bricking it. But some questions in the chat about technology, not necessarily technology, but hardware. So is there kind of a standard, a minimum expectation that you would have for your guides to go out and deliver this? And Brandon and Stephen, maybe you've provided guides with the tech. Pepe, in the chat, you mentioned you used your iPhone, but is there any kind of minimum requirements in terms of tech spec that you would expect when you go out there and set this up? Stephen, do you want to tell us what your guides do?
Sure. For the at-home stuff, we run tests on their network connection, make sure it's fast enough. So we have them run a speed test and give us results there just to make sure they're qualified for even doing a live video stream. The next thing is, you can do it with a laptop. If you're doing a multimedia presentation, obviously you can't really do that out and about. You need an iPad or a smartphone or something like that. Obviously you need some sort of steady cam, not necessarily, but a gimbal works really well. A lot of guides are using that. It's not a huge investment. And there's, some kind of selfie stick. If you're outside, this or a tripod works really well. Having some of the guides use a friend, to hold the phone. I mean, we're not talking super high tech here. Somebody's holding a phone and pointing it at the guide while they explain and then walk around. So that's really it. Zoom works well. Big Marker, Brandon mentioned. There's, tons of different products you can use. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, if YouTube's up. Went down the other day. That was hilarious. But Instagram also can work well if you're just trying to get an audience. And I've seen a lot of guides and people like Pepe out there doing a lot of live videos on location to get an audience. And then from there, it's trying to sell future things. And so that works really well. Some people are doing the recordings, so recording the product and then putting it online and selling it for much cheaper. We haven't done that, mostly because then it seems to be disincentivizing people from booking live. But I've heard from people that works really well too. But you don't really need a lot of tech here. I mean, smartphone and a Zoom account, maybe. You pay for the Zoom account $15 a month. Which gives you access to the features that makes it a better experience. If you want to pay a little bit more, I think it's up to $50 a month. You get, the web package that gives you polls and various other things. So that can be nice. We've used that before as well. But we've generally provided the Zoom accounts, and we have a number of paid accounts that we're using. But you really only need one to get started. You really only need a free account on Zoom, at least, if you're going to do tours of less than 50 minutes.
Okay, brilliant. I think that covers it really well. One question that's come up in the chat is about pricing. And interesting, we had a session earlier with Christian Watts about pricing. It's a subject that he loves. But this is a new ground really in terms of pricing. So how do you come up with the prices for your tours? Pepe, how did you come up with that figure? Where did you get that from? How's it work? It's so different.
I mean, I really essentially haven't been offering a public product. So I've just been doing private pre-existing groups, and I've been able to get blue badge rates. So they, remember, you can have unlimited viewers with a group essentially on Zoom. So in fact, it works out very economical. And some groups will pay extra for a particularly large group. If I host it on my own Zoom account, they'll pay extra for that. For most of the public virtuals that I've seen in London, the average goes for about £10, between 8 to 12 approximately. One of the big successes people have been having, and we've talked a little bit about this, is a lot of the guides are now selling a series. So if you book 4, then you'll get a 25% discount. So that's another marketing method. My own program, I'm selling for 20 tours for £40. So they're essentially getting £2 per tour if they book the whole program. So I'm going for volume rather than for high end.
Yep.
It is worth pointing out that the Guide London website traffic is only down 25% year on year, amazingly, because we have really been promoting virtual tours on our Instagram site, on Facebook as well. And 90% of the leads that are generating, we are still generating leads, are being generated for virtual tours. So there is an audience out there, definitely.
Okay, brilliant. So somebody's popped in the chat. Any opinion on Tour HQ or any of those virtual tour host companies? Any opinion? Any thoughts of that? Waste of time.
I'm not
Tour
familiar with
HQ.
Tour HQ.
No?
I thought
Okay.
were they doing the
I know Tour HQ. They've wanted to work to resell product. I mean, we didn't do it, just one more thing to do, but I'm sure they're fine. I mean, they seem like nice people.
Yeah. So probably the final question really, and firstly to Stephen and Brandon, but we're not no one's going to predict the future here because we can't. We don't know what we don't know what that means. But do you envisage always from now on having that kind of tour at home, that virtual experience as part of your product range, or do you envisage a time when it will kind of die off again?
Oh,
I mean,
go on, Pepe. Then you can.
Can I make a quick point? I had the most amazing email from a client who said, "Thank you. I'm housebound. I've been housebound for 2 years. And this is the first time in that length of time that I've been able to do an activity with the rest of my group, and I felt included." And then a light bulb went on over my head. I thought, wow, there's definitely going to be a life post-COVID for virtual tours for all those people that can't get out and do it in the real world.
Brilliant, thank you. And quickly, Stephen and Brendan and Kelsey, a very short word on this before we finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all discovered there is kind of a market for it. I don't think it's going to replace actual live tours when people can actually physically visit a site. It could be something, like Pepe says, for people who are handicapped in any way, who can't actually physically travel. I think it can be a great product for them. I also think it could be something maybe complementary. So let's say you've booked a Vatican tour for next year, you're coming to Rome, you're excited. Hey, why don't you watch this virtual tour first to kind of whet your appetite for it.
Yep. Okay.
So
brilliant.
I think there's definitely a market for that in the future.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen, what's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to keep doing something like this at least through next year. What we see it as is a marketing opportunity and a way to get in front of customers that we couldn't reach otherwise, a way to stay connected. And as Kelsey said, extend that customer lifetime value. Maybe they came to Rome once, took one tour with you, went home. You really wouldn't have them much to sell after that, depending on how many more big bucket list trips in your destinations they take, whereas virtual can continue to extend that. So I think it's partly a marketing play long term. We'll keep supporting it. And if the market really rebounds in terms of our core product, then maybe invest in this area more down the line. But for now, it's a nice thing to have. And as we've all said, it's to help support the tour guides is a really great reason to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. And Kelsey, are we going to be learning these skills for the future? You've got 30 seconds, I'm afraid, mate.
Yeah, well, I think here's the thing. So many tour leaders, tour directors, freelance guides, they were just told, hey, you guys have to go home. We don't need you right now. What you're doing is dangerous. And what I honestly feel, and I know many others feel, is that the world actually needs us now more than ever. The ability to bring people together, to inspire them, to tell captivating stories, to open their eyes to the incredible stuff in the world. If you think you need to be physically in front of somebody to do that, you're really selling yourself short. And so we strongly believe that this is an incredible skill set for guides and tour companies around the world to build. The future is unknown. We, like Stephen and Brandon, think it's going to continue to exist. And there's always an off season. There's always this aging group called the baby boomers. I don't know if you've heard about them, but one day they're not going to be able to pop on a plane and fly over and do a trip with Brandon or Stephen. And they might just be sitting at home looking for one of you.
All right. Thanks, Pepe. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for answering the questions and all your answers. So appreciate that. Everybody, I've put the link for the next session in the chat. It's the same link that's on your email. So hop on over to that in a second, and I'll see you in a couple of secs. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.